Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Straight Talk. An interesting one this is, because of course I'm at home and we are recording it remotely. Hopefully it will sound like we are all together, but we're not. No, the powers of technology and the internet has allowed us to record this episode all remotely while we're at home. I'm Nicki Shields and this is Straight Talk. Now, since the lockdown began, it's been rather devastating because we've kind of seen the end of all sport. Well, almost all sport. We've actually seen a huge increase in the amount of virtual gaming that's happening all around the world. And Formula E, of course, have launched its very own Race at Home challenge, where there's a sim race and the Formula E drivers all racing against each other. And it's been really good fun. So do tune in if you haven't seen it yet. But today we're going to be chatting all things esports, kind of talking about, who likes it, who doesn't? Is it a decent replacement for motorsport? I am really pleased to be joined by some fantastic guests for today's podcast. So please welcome, actually, we're welcoming him back to this one, to Straight Talk. It is, of course, Mahindra Racing's driver, very own Jerome D'Ambrosio. We're also joined by the Mahindra Racing Simulator development driver and 2017 World's Fastest Gamer champion, Rudy van Buren. And we've also got Simon Fitchett here with us, who works as a physical and mental coach in sport and has done for decades. And I think has worked quite closely with Jerome over the course of the years. And so hopefully we're going to be getting some tips from Simon. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure.
Jerome, I'm going to kick off with you if we can. First of all, it must be really, really tough lockdown because it looks like you're stuck somewhere. Whoa, pretty awful. Just explain to us your surroundings at the moment.
Well, thanks, Nikki. Hi, everyone. First of all, so yeah, I'm locked on an island actually outside of Dubrovnik in Croatia, called Lopud, and yeah, I must say that we've been quite fortunate to end up being locked down here because I'm able to still train, to still go outside. I've been able to swim even, and that's been good. I speak to my family and my sister. She's in an apartment in Brussels. I haven't been able to get outside and so on. It's definitely a different lockdown for some of my friends or my family, and so I'm really, really lucky to be able to still spend some time in nature and.
Oh, very fortunate indeed. We are very envious. Guys, where are you locked up? Rudy, you're obviously spending lots of time on the simulator, but where are you?
Holland. And I think we're quite fortunate here as well that we can move around quite a lot, actually. Besides the shops being closed down for a period and so on, I didn't really notice anything of it. So I think we should be grateful for that. But yeah, like you said, a lot of sim coaching with Tom Cornell mainly. And it's quite filling up the weeks for now.
You're quite lucky. You're about one of the only sportsmen who can actually continue to practice their sport in this situation.
Yeah, but next to that, the Porsche Carrera Cup Germany season should have started already, which I will be competing this year. So on that front, it's a pity, but things are moving slowly. So the calendar has been shown around inside the team circle. So I think if everything goes on a bit, we'll be racing by September. So,
and Simon, I mean, normally, just explain to us as a sort of mind performance coach, what would a normal day look like in the old world, and what does your day look like now?
For me, fortunately, not a huge amount's changed because I'm working a lot in esports at the moment. So we have a lot of online. Well, we have an online racing championship, which I'm helping the guys involved with that. As well as the F1 Esports Championship. So that's all being done remotely at the moment. So I'm able to continue working with them. And I think during this time, that's really, it's rocketed, basically. It's really taken off. And I think a lot of guys are getting involved from inside of F1 and legend retired F1 drivers as well, racing every weekend. So that's growing really well. So in terms of my side of things, not a huge amount's changed, but obviously I have far less face-to-face interaction with people, and that is big. And I think that's one of the big challenges that faces us all, really, the the sudden face-to-face interaction with people every day and chatting with people and being in close proximity of people to suddenly nothing and being not locked up, but with the same couple of faces 24/7. That has its challenges, and I think highlights importance the how essential it is for us as humans really to have sort of face-to-face interaction with different people. It's part of our social skills and part of our makeup.
It is very strange. Someone had to come to my house. So we've started the Race at Home Challenge, which is obviously the Formulary sim racing competition that's taking place at the moment. And I had to have a backdrop fitted just for this, for the home studio. And obviously, we kept 2 meters apart and social distancing, etc. But it was just really strange to actually see someone and actually they came into my house. It was very bizarre. So it's like, get out, what are you doing here? This is not the normal anymore. You do sort of become you adapt to the new situation very quickly. Mm-hmm. But I can't wait to get back to normality. But speaking of the Race at Home Challenge, Jerome, talk to us. How is it going? Because sim racing, obviously you as a racing driver spend a lot of time in a simulator, but how does that compare to the rig that you have at home for the virtual racing? And how have you been finding it so far?
Well, first of all, I think, let's start with the first point. It's a good initiative, and it's for a good cause. And that's the most important thing. Secondly, I think that it's great to be able to provide some sort of content for the fans and still do something. I think for sure most of us on the grid are not professional sim racers. It's a beast of its own, it's quite different. And especially in terms of the feedback that you get. You don't have a lot of cues from the simulator, and it's quite different even from the one that we have at Mahindra. So obviously you have the real car, then a team simulator is closer to reality. It's the closest thing you can get from reality. And then you have the sim racing at home, which is further away from that. And for me, it's very different. I've never really done it. It's the first time I have a rig at home. I received it a few weeks ago. Obviously, it's one of these things where you need a lot of hours on it to figure out how to get quick on it and so on, and how to get some sort of feeling for it. But again, I think what is good is that we're still creating some content, we're still racing, and it's for a good cause. So it's different from reality, but I think it's definitely a good thing to do.
It's interesting to watch because in the Race at Home Challenge, there's the sim racers competition, and then there's the Formulary competition. And it's quite interesting to watch the difference of these two races. Rudy, what's your view? Because the Formulary drivers, well, they don't really compare to the sim racers, do they? They've still got a bit of work to do.
Well, I think our very own Pascal Verlaine has been, is doing really great. I think Stoffel and Max Günther as well. These three are obviously more used to these sim at home or games or whatever. Perhaps they've done it. It's also perhaps a generation thing, clearly. And then you see the guys like me, like Di Grassi, Buemi, even Antonio da Costa, really struggling with it. So I think there's, we can't put all the Formula E drivers in the same category. I think definitely there's a bunch, and I'm part of them that struggling a bit more just to get the grips of this thing. And then you have 2 or 3, I think, that are actually doing pretty well and possibly would be able, I think, to compete actually with the real sim racers. But it's not something new. Although the rig that we had in Vegas 2 years ago was of lower quality, I think, than what we have now. The difference were huge between the professional gamers and us. And there's only 1 or 2 Formula E drivers who themselves like to actually use these simulators at home that were somehow competitive. But the rest of us it's a different thing. It's just a different one.
Rudy, are you impressed then with the performance from, Max Günther and Stoffel van Dorn?
Well, I think you can see the generation thing. All the younger guys, doesn't matter what racing class it is, pick up the simulator stuff a lot more easy. They're used to it. They struggle less with the lack of feel coming through their bum. Am I impressed? Yeah, they're doing well. We've had some races over the past weeks as well where they competed against us. Then they're still a bit off, but they're getting closer. So that's good to see. As for the rest, I think it's a good initiative that Formula E is doing this, but I do hope some of the real life drivers, well, how do you say this nicely? Stop crashing. I'm not going to say it nice. It's just going to be me. So because the last few weeks, the first few laps has been terrible, and I think in real life they hit each other a bit and you get away with it. But in sim racing, there's one thing called netcode, which is difficult. And then people comment like, "Yeah, I can do this in real life." And like, yeah, but this is not real life. You're driving a virtual version of your car, and you should not see it as the same thing. But overall, I do think sim racing in general is also be given a spotlight now, and also gets more appreciated by the older generation. And some of them might even pop into the sim a bit more as well in the off season. Overall, it's been a bonus for everything.
And as Simon pointed out, it's been brilliant to see the likes of Emerson Fittipaldi out of retirement and back racing in the sim world. I mean, who would have thought?
And doing well as well, and he's still got it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I wanted to say that it's amazing to see those names jump in, and also the race all stars who have made it possible. Also by separating them from the rest. Initially, there was one big bunch of people going to the same final, and then you could really see the pace difference and so on. But now they took the generations apart. We get really cool races, and with the names on the grid there, I think everybody is astonished what's been pulled off, and the grid's even growing. I'm literally sitting next to Tom Cornell's house right now to prepare him for the coming race there as well. So they're taking it serious, and that's cool to see.
So how do you, other than just putting time in on the sim, how do you help these racers prepare? Where can they improve? What tips, in fact, would you give Jerome?
That's off the record. That's off the record.
No, it's good seat time. If you take a sim race into a real car, he will struggle because he gets feeling in places where he's never been used to it, and the opposite way as well. And it just takes time to get used to it. And in the end, yes, the controls are the same as a real car, but the impressions are way different. So mostly it's taming them down initially. If I take Tom as an example here, he's missing corners, oversteering everywhere. And the one comment you hear the whole time is, the real car doesn't do this. Like, hey, this is not the real car. Pull your finger out, focus on the thing you're driving, and get this thing as quick around the track as possible. And we're actually up to the point now where we're using data logging and so on, because that's the way maybe let's say the old generation's used to improving. They see lines in the screen and they know what to do. So that's what we've been working on.
Okay.
So big steps of improvement.
It's interesting what he's saying, because definitely I think one part of where I struggle is I always feel I'm going to get the lap time on the brakes and stuff, and then I make a mess out of it. It's most of the time, and then so tuning it down. But yeah, I mean, then sometimes I feel like I tune it down too much. So I think he's right. Seat time is probably one of the things that is important. Like for everything, you don't become good at something just by by watching TV. Unless you want to be good at watching TV. and so yeah.
It's interesting because I can kind of sense a bit of frustration on both sides, right? You're obviously frustrated that not getting the lap times that you want, because I know you are putting in the time, the practice time, and then Rudy, I sense there is a frustration from your side being like, why can't these drivers get better?
I think it'd be the same the other way around as well. If it'd be the same if Jerome was coaching Rudy in the Porsche, I think it'd be quite similar. Where that's where this sort of respect comes from both sides, and as Rudy rightly said, it's hours. You need hours of seat time to adjust to it.
To be honest, also the perspective. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I speak for myself. Obviously, there's a generation of drivers like as I say, like let's say the 30 plus or around 30. It's difficult to see a perspective in putting. I mean, you need to put some of the guys, and Rudy, I think, will back me up on this one. It's hours and hours and hours on the rig, and obviously, putting hours on the rig when you see a perspective beyond another 4 races in e-racing is it's a different thing than saying, look, I'm going to do these another 4 or 5 races, and then that's it. And my job as a race car driver is driving the car in Formula E on the track, and that's actually where I really want to be good. And I think there's perhaps also a clash of worlds with guys that really take it like seriously, because it's perhaps part of also the future. but a future that they can, that they can see, that they can look forward to, where, there's a generation who's like, our reality as race car driver never embraced sim racing beyond preparing for a real race weekend, which in Formula E, it's not even really for performance, but Rudy, who works with us quite a lot, can knows that it's preparing for the energy management. That's really what we're trying to figure out on the sim. So I think also the lack of perspective with sim racing on the beyond this championship, I think perhaps that's what it makes it difficult for someone to say, okay, I'm going to sit and do 7 hours a day of sim or 3 hours a day of sim.
I mean, now that obviously there is no sport to watch really at the moment other than sim racing. And, it's getting a lot of views now. Do you think the perception of sim racing has changed, and maybe we've got more traditional racing fans watching it as well as the sim racing fans? And do you think we're going to start to maybe see more of the younger generation wanting to become sim racers?
A lot of, like you say, I think it's content creation, and it's good to create content. Having said that, it's true that the past few races have not been the cleanest races. That emphasized the fact for the public that these guys can do whatever they want in a sim and nothing happens, and it's part of it. It's not the reality. I think that there's, of course, is a part of gamers around the world and people who really enjoy gaming and sim racing and so on, that really like it. And then there's another part of people who are like, well, it's nice, but it's not the real thing. These guys can crash, nothing happens. They can, and so on. I mean, I'm going to show a quick video. I mean, it's not that, it's always clean. This is exactly the same start in Monaco, first year or second year of Formula E. Look, I think it seems pretty similar than what we had, crashes happen in real life as well, but there are definitely consequences to it. And that's not the case in sim racing, which is why sometimes it might seem that it's getting a little bit more silly from the outside. And some people, I know that the feedback of some people is like, well, that's not something that we enjoy seeing too much.
And really, for anyone, because I'm sure there are going to be a few sim racing, those that maybe want to become sim racers listening at the moment, do you have any sort of top tips for those wanting to become a professional sim racer?
Expect to put in a heap of time. I think sim racing the last few years has evolved a lot. Even after when I won World's Fastest Game in 2017, I kind of stepped out of the sim world because I got the Formula One sim job. I went to events and so on. I couldn't really compete in championships. But since that time, there's money involved in sim racing, a lot more than it used to be. And that causes one thing, it's people to go fully professional on it. Doing so, they are putting between 8 and 10 hours a day, 7 hours a week. So the level is ridiculously high. It's almost to a stupid level. And I'm glad to see that some competitions don't announce a certain track and car combination till one day prior to the race. Because if you give the top sim racers at the moment a finger, they're going to take your whole hand and they're going to practice for a week straight, 10 hours a day for a race that lasts 15 minutes. So if you're up to that point, if you think you can commit to it in that kind of way, then you can make it into sim racing. If not, might consider keeping it as a hobby. Because for some of them, it's not hobby anymore; it's becoming work, and it's literally their income. So the sim world is changing. That said, real life teams are appreciating it more. It's getting more spotlights. The current situation with all the races will give it more spotlight in the future. So it can become, for some of them, a stepping stone into the real world. But as always, more won't make it than actually will. But if you've got the motivation to put in that time and think you can step out of the group and be better, get a wheel. Don't go over the top straight away. Start with some Fanatec CSL kind of equipment, so it's doable if you have your normal job in the weekend, so you can afford it yourself, and start chipping away and putting in the time.
Yeah, as you said, I mean, that is an incredibly huge commitment, the hours that you're talking about there. It really is, it turns into a full-time job pretty soon. Simon, what, you've spent so many years working with racing drivers and helping them, I suppose, to get them right at the top of the competition using mind skills. But how can you coach drivers in this current situation when we're under lockdown so that they can maintain this edge?
Well, I think I think first and foremost, you have to, the brain is, although it's scientifically, it's not a muscle, but it has a lot of similarities to a muscle. So if we want a muscle to work at its optimum, we've got to work that muscle. And it's exactly the same with the brain. So if we're entering, when we entered lockdown, the sort of daily stimulation that our brains would have went from a high level, especially with racing drivers, with what they're doing with their engineers and race preparation and everything like that, as well as the media and their whole schedule. It's suddenly gone to zero, and that is something that is very challenging. And we take a professional footballer, for example. If you took a football off him for 3 months, and then after 3 months go, there you go, they're not going to have the sharpness and that sort of skill that they had 3 months prior. So if you look at it like that, that makes it more of a simple way of understanding how important it is to keep our minds active during this time of lockdown. And everybody's different. Everyone has to try to work out what works for them to stimulate them in the right way. We know for certain that physically training is going to help. If you keep working on your fitness and keep doing the things that you do during the season anyway, that's going to help you mentally to an extent. And then you've got to look at other things to try to help keep those levels of daily stimulation up, rather than just sit and watch box sets and people sitting online looking at their Instagram all the time. That is not productive, especially when you're at the level that these guys are at, where they need to almost, they need to consider their competitors, and they want to be doing more than them during this time to try and, when everything does restart, be that slight step ahead of them.
So, Jerome, what have you been doing to keep that edge going?
Like Simon said, I think I've never been training so much in the last 5 or 6 years, because being in one place without traveling allows my body to allows me to get the right amount of sleep every night, get a routine, eat properly, and really I'm training. Roughly I'm swimming 10K a week. I'm going running. I've got 3 sessions with a trainer that I found here on the island. That's not my trainer, but I've adapted to that, and I really, I will do every day something. I take 1 day rest a week, and the rest I'm on it. I've tried, like Simon said, I've tried to stay active as well mentally, and of course the sim is one way to do it. And I'm nowhere near putting the hours. And this is a personal thing, it's just me. But I'm not putting 8 hours a day, 7 days a week on it. I've practiced a bit every day, but not to that extent, because I want to do other things as well. I don't know. I personally feel like sitting in behind a game for 8 hours a day, maybe I'm a bit old school, but it's kind of stepping in this virtual world, and I don't find a lot of gratification out of that, because in the end, for me, it remains a game. But this is personal. I totally respect that some people see it differently, but to me, it's playing video games 8 hours a day, and to a certain extent, it's so different as well from what I'm doing, that it's good to do it a little bit. I mean, it's good to do it, but it's not training. I can't wait, for example, to get out of lockdown and to be able to go karting, because that is really close from reality. That's the best training, and before we're getting back in the season, that's something I'm going to do, and that's going to really keep me sharp, muscle wise, mental wise, because what you don't get also in the sim, and it's quite interesting, it's probably the thing I struggle the most, is perception of depth. So the impression of speed and so on, I don't really get it. So yeah, I mean, I've done obviously a bit of sim. I've also done some educated myself. I've started a online course. In
what?
I did a global business course in Harvard online, and now I've subscribed to a new one also in the same university, just because it's a few. Again, it fills my day. It's a few. It's maybe 2 hours a day, but it works my head. It works my brain. It makes me think out of the box, learn something new, and it's perhaps no different than listening to an engineer who speaks, and you have to also have that type of discussion with your engineer. So in the end, I'm trying really to get a mix of training, physical training, get my brain to be stimulated and challenged, and to learn something new, and then some sim racing as well.
You're doing all the right things, Jerome. That's all the right things.
Well, I spent a year with you, Simon. I know you do.
that set you up for this. That's why you're so happy and smiling.
Yeah, it's nothing to do about being on an island in Croatia.
No, I think what's important for me is we're locked down, but I don't want to see this as it's a lockdown and it's difficult for everybody, but I want to turn this into an opportunity. And not into something. There's always, in a difficult situation, there's always an opportunity to turn things into something and to do something that you're interested in, that you wouldn't really have normally the time to do, or whatever it is. And that's what's important. And of course, I'm having weekly, although we're not driving, I'm also having weekly conversation with the engineers and keep up, to date with what the team is on. So I'm actually really busy, but in one place, and so I've been able to really maximize my time efficiency.
That sounds great. Have you been listening to any podcasts or reading any books that you can share with us?
No, I've been in books. I've been in books and stuff, but kind of, to learn something different. So yeah, there was an interesting podcast from Julian and think about Julian Jacobi. I don't know if you heard about it, but that's about it. The rest I've been, as I said, I've been studying, training, and sim racing.
So Julian Jacobi has done a podcast, I think it's the F1 podcast, and a really long interview about his career as a driver manager for, how many years has he been doing it? I don't know.
He's not exactly young.
I better not guess. Yeah, he's been doing it for many years. He used to look after Ayrton Senna, and now looks after Jerome D'Ambrosio. From one big name to another,
and others, but
many others,
and many others. But I think more than 30 years. So
incredibly experienced man in the world of motorsport. Simon, I have another question for you. I want to know, why do I go from 1 minute, I am loving lockdown, it's the greatest thing, I'm cherishing these incredible moments with my family, I've had a really productive day, to the frustrations of lockdown, it's driving me mad, I'm climbing up the walls, I want to throw my laptop across the room because the audio's not working on my Zoom call. Why does this happen? Why do we go from these highs and lows, and how can we stop that from happening?
Well, I think if you think about it, if you take in, pre-lockdown, we all go through highs and lows all the time anyway.
This is true, yes.
It's more magnified in
no comment on being an emotional woman, okay?
No, I won't say anything. No, I think you have to, it does be, because you've got less variety and stimulation going on in your everyday life, everything's almost magnified. So it's brilliant to absolutely, during these times, to take the positives out of everything. Having time with family is something you don't get every day normally. So it's something that we can take the positive out of that. Then you look at the other side where, like I said earlier, we've got no sort of one-to-one interaction or facial interaction with our friends, colleagues and everything. And that makes it very challenging. And our moods can go from one level to another level very quickly. And I've even found myself, my mood swings have been sort of, I find myself getting angry sometimes over things I wouldn't normally, but sometimes we have too much sleep and everything's changing. And I honestly say to a lot of people that I talk to about this is use this time to help you improve your self-awareness, become more in tune with yourself and how you're feeling, because as I said, everything's being exaggerated during this time. We feel so much more of what's going on, because normally in everyday life, we're concentrating on so many things. The time goes by so much quicker. And when we're thinking of things to do, and again, with what Jerome was saying earlier on, not everyone is like Jerome. Not everyone has that level of commitment and dedication and desire to work on things to improve in different areas as well. Some people will probably be listening to this going, wow, how does Jerome do that? I don't find the energy or the sort of gumption to go and do that. I don't know what to do. So Jerome's, I would say, at a level where that's what I said at the beginning. I know him. He's not someone that would sit there and just let this time consume him. And he's gone out and done various different things to improve his knowledge in different areas. And these are all things that I would suggest to lots of people. Do simple things. Go and find new hobbies. to do
I
that
think
you can do inside.
You mentioned that that's a great phrase. The time just consumes you. It does. I mean, you know, I've got a long list of things that I really would like to do. But of course, it gets to the end of the day and I haven't done any of them. How do you go from that, okay, this is what I want to achieve, to actually, like Jerome, is getting it done?
Make a list of the things you want to get done each day and stick to them. And yeah, during this time, it should be easier for you to get those things done, depending on what other commitments you've got. Obviously, if you're in full lockdown, or some people are furloughed and they actually cannot work, they're in a situation where they are, crikey, what do we do? We're all lucky we're still doing various bits and bobs of work, and which helps us pass the time quicker. But there are people out there who literally are not allowed to do. There's people who've gone and volunteered and things like that. But there are people sat at home going, I'm not allowed to email, otherwise, you know, I've effectively worked, and then, you know, I put the company in trouble. They have to literally switch off from everything. So it's those guys, I think, I feel for, because and they're the people who need the most support.
And are there any sort of like books or podcasts or anything that you would recommend listening to, or is it just really dependent on the individual's, I guess, preferences and choice of what they want to start doing?
Absolutely. It depends what their interests are. Obviously now, as from today, we're allowed to go outside more. I would absolutely say, especially when we have been really lucky with the weather here in the UK. So we have been able to get out for our one part of exercise a day, and now we're allowed to go out more, go outside. Don't stay in the house. Now we're allowed to go outside more and do more sports with someone within the same household. And you know, there is people been saying about this grey area and can we do this? At the end of the day, we have to use our sense of humour, common sense, and our own intelligence to work out what is right and what is wrong. But
sounding like Boris Johnson there, Simon.
Right, that is not good. No, but
no, I'm only joking.
we have to use this time to develop ourselves and like I said, become more in tune with ourselves and put ourselves into, you know, basically the magic happens always when you step outside of your comfort zone. We're all out of our comfort zone at the moment. Some of us are lost, don't know what to do. That's when we find things that help us move forwards and help us develop ourselves.
Absolutely. So on that note, I would like to end this podcast with each of you giving me one sort of point. What, in terms of like thing when it comes to personal development, can you take from being in lockdown? Jerome, do you want to kick off?
You know what lockdown also forces you to do, and our normal life often doesn't, especially, you know, nowadays, which is, you know, fast paced, always traveling around and everything. One thing that lockdown forces you to do is to be with yourself, you know, and have some time to think about things. And a lot of people are actually, you know, very uncomfortable with silence, for example, because you're just there with yourself and there's nothing to do necessarily. And so you just have to listen to whatever, you know, you might not be at ease with or whatever. A lot of things surface and, you know, and that's an opportunity, I think, to identify, to learn about yourself and to try to address these things in whatever way you can. One thing that I cannot imagine is looking at time and say, waiting for something to happen and just, you know, there's this French expression, say, I need to kill a bit of time. And I really dislike that expression, because you make the most out of every minute that you get given. I think that's really important. So yeah, I think what you can do is just, you know, listen to yourself, whatever might be uncomfortable, whatever it is, and try to address whatever comes to your mind. Because I believe it's important sometimes to calm down and to be at peace with yourself.
Okay, so you've enjoyed managing to spend a bit more time with yourself. That's good. Simon, what would you say that you've taken from all of this?
I think all of Jerome's points are very good. I think, learning to be at peace in your own company if you are feeling lonely, especially people who live alone. And I think for me, work-wise is just always on the go. And then you have a young child. When you get home, you want to spend time with them, and then the day's gone, and the next day starts. And my fitness basically disappeared. And during this lockdown, I've got back out my road bike again and been doing plenty of cycling, which is, you know, makes me immediately feel better. I know for me, I need to have my fitness levels up for me to be functioning fully in the way that I do. And I think that's really helped a lot. And I think not taking things for granted. Things can change so quickly. No one saw this coming. It's a new experience for everyone, and things can change in a second. And we have to be prepared for it, and also look after those around us who are struggling. We can see people smiling, but we don't know what's going on behind their smiles.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so the power of fitness and also making the most of what we have. Thanks, Simon. And Rudy, to finish it off, what would you say you've taken from this as a positive in lockdown?
I think for me personally, it's mostly about appreciating the freedom we normally had, which I always took for granted. Like Simon said, always on the go. Everything's normal. You go from plane to plane, from country to country, and all of a sudden you're stuck at home. And I'm even in a country where we've not been really stuck, I'd say. But I needed to go to Belgium last week, and that was a struggle. I needed a special waiver to cross the border. Like, what the hell? Never been used to these kind of things. So I think as soon as the lockdown in all the countries around us get taken off, people appreciate it more when you're able to go on holiday to the other side of the world, when you can work outside of your own country. I just take it everything less for granted that's happening. That's my main thing from this. Possibly because, like I said, our lockdown in Holland has not been as strict as on the other sides. So it's more what actually happening around the country than what I'm actually facing myself. But I can't wait until we can move normally again, because we're not used to cross a border to a different country without special papers.
Yeah, exactly. I just can't wait to go to my parents' house. Woohoo! And well, Rudy, thank you very much. Yeah, I completely agree. Enjoying the freedom to travel and move around is definitely something we will never take for granted again. For me, I have just loved, though, not having to pack a suitcase. Oh, it's amazing. My bedroom has stayed tidy for 2 months. It's incredible. Guys, thank you so much. It's been really, really interesting to talk to you, in these strange lockdown circumstances. And I'm glad that we're all taking positives from it. But also, I know we all cannot wait to get racing again very soon. Make sure you do catch Jerome D'Ambrosio. Will obviously be racing in the Race at Home Challenge every Saturday and until the 6th and 7th of June with the grand final. Rudy, when can we catch your next race?
This Saturday, the race All-Stars with the Formula V8 at a track that's luckily not been announced until 24 hours prior to the event. That's all I'm doing at the moment. I stepped away from a full-on active sim career, which I did after 2017. So it's just these tiny events, and the first one is this Saturday.
Wicked. Well, good luck for that race. And thank you all again. Stay safe, stay at home, and we will be back with another episode of Straight Talk very soon.